The Coffee Hour. Welcome to Coffee with our morning host. We broadcast a host of programs like current topics, newspaper headlines, and music on Radio Sri Lanka. Tune in every weekday from 7 to 8 a.m.
Well, it's precisely 7:27 in the morning. A very good morning to you. So we are having Mr. Sugeeshwara Senadhira today at the Beam to talk about the independence of Sri Lanka, which will be celebrated on the 4th of February. And to move on with the topic, Mr. Sugeeshwara, could you brief us about the influence of the global socialist movements and the impact on the independence struggle?
Sri Lankan youths, those who studied abroad at that time, the early last century, people like Dr. N.M. Perra, Dr. Colin de Silva, Philip Gunawardena, who studied in the United States, they followed the socialist line. In fact, some of them joined the global socialist movement when the Paris Declaration was launched by China's Zhou Enlai, Vietnam's Ho Chi Minh, and India's Krishna Menon, the Mexican and Colombian socialist leaders. They got together in Paris and signed a declaration way back in 1929, and Philip was the signatory to that, and Philip Gunawardena, the father of the current Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena, he signed on behalf of the Sri Lankan socialist movement. So they studied abroad, and when they came, they started a non-cooperation with the British under their banner, the Sri Lanka's first political party, Lanka Samasamaja Party, which was formed in 1935. And the socialist movement, the non-cooperation struggle, they fought for the workers' rights, downtrodden people. In fact, when the malaria epidemic took place and thousands were dying in the far-flung areas in Ampara, Polonnaruwa and Anuradhapura, these people went and distributed food and medicine to those people and did a lot of voluntary services for the benefit of the masses, and they fought for their land rights, trade union rights. In fact, the first trade union was formed by them. And this movement, the women's wing of that, people like Vivian Gunawardena and Prime Minister's mother Kusuma Gunawardena and Doreen Wickramasinghe, that is Dr. S.A. Wickramasinghe's wife, they all got together and they started Suryamal movement. Suryamal was to defy the poppy flower movement of the British to raise funds for the British soldiers. Instead, they wanted money to be raised for the Sri Lankans, and they started Suryamal movement. So their contribution was immense for the freedom struggle. However, they had to undergo a lot of difficulties during this long-drawn struggle. They were arrested several times. Once when they were arrested, they managed to escape from prison and went across to India. That is Philip Gunawardena, Lester Gunawardena, Colin de Silva, Robert Gunawardena, the whole lot went to India, and they joined the Indian freedom struggle. Under pseudonyms, they addressed the rallies against the British in Mumbai and Calcutta, and they were arrested by the British forces in India too and kept in jail. When Philip Gunawardena and Kusuma Gunawardena were jailed in Mumbai, their first son, Prime Minister's elder brother Indika, was born in the prison in Mumbai. Then it was called Bombay, now it's Mumbai. So their struggle and sacrifice must be remembered. This was a continuous struggle. Then even the other camp, people like D.R. Vijayawardena, the Sir D.B. Jayatilaka, D.S. Senanayaka, they too contributed immensely to the freedom movement and discussions with the colonial powers to gain independence.
Yes, so that was about the influence on the global socialist movements and the impact that they had during the independence struggle of Sri Lanka. And now, subsequently, after the independence, numerous significant occurrences took place in the history of Sri Lanka. So, those milestones paved the way for the changes in the number of domains in and out, and like in administration, the livelihood and the culture of Sri Lanka. So, Mr. Sugeeshwara, could you tell us about and brief us about things that we got after independence?
Though we gained independence in 1948, the certain British forces were stationed in Sri Lanka, in Trincomalee and few other camps, because we were still under the British throne. However, in 1956, the first the change of government in Sri Lanka. Prior to that, in 1953, there was a major struggle by the workers' movement spearheaded by the socialist parties in Sri Lanka, and that demonstrations held throughout the country by the workers of Sri Lanka resulted in overthrow, or rather the resignation of the then Prime Minister Dudley Senanayake. However, the government did not change. The new Prime Minister Sir John Katalawala took over in 1953, and that was the first major workers' strike in Sri Lanka. Then 3 years later, in 1956, Panchamaha Balavega, the Mahasangha, peasants, workers, intellectuals, indigenous doctors, they all got together to form a powerful front, and it resulted in Mahajan Eksat Peramuna MEP coming into power under the leadership of SWRD Bandaranaike, who was the leader of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party then, and Philip Gunawardena. They got together and formed the government in 1956. Immediately, one of the first steps they have taken was to ask the British forces to withdraw from Sri Lanka. Then, after Mrs. Bandaranaike came to power in 1960, she took over the British plantations in Sri Lanka too. So gradually these Sri Lankan the ownership took place in most of the British properties. The shell gas was closed down, and certain British companies were taken over by the government. And these are the major milestones. Then 1972 we became a republic, and 1976 we became the pioneer of the non-aligned movement. That is, we have become one of the major members of the pioneers of the non-aligned movement when it was formed, with India's Jawaharlal Nehru, Ghana's Nkrumah, Indonesia's Suharto, Egypt's Nasser. All of them got together and formed the non-aligned movement, which became a very, very powerful force. Though non-aligned, the relevance of non-alignment declined with the collapse of the Soviet Union and the power blocks, the transformation in power blocks later. However, even this year, the last month, the President addressed the non-aligned movement, which was held in Uganda. So we are still a member, and we are trying hard to, because our foreign policy since independence are based on the neutrality, non-alignment and neutrality. That is the pillar of our foreign policy. So to strengthen that, because our main aim, 1960s, Mrs. Bandaranaike proposed that Indian Ocean should be a zone of peace at the United Nations. Our main aim is to keep the strategic naval routes from east to west free of power rivalries. And Sri Lanka being a major central point in that route, our entire future will depend on the peace of navigation in this area, so that our harbors, our ports could prosper and the nation could prosper.
Yeah, so that was all about the benefits and what the things that we got after the independence of Sri Lanka, that was after 1948. So the time comes down to 7:37 in the morning. A very good morning to you, and let's get back in conversation back with Mr. Senadhira after music.
Radio wherever you are. Radio Sri Lanka. Radio Sri Lanka, the station to the nation.
Well, it's precisely 7:44 in the morning. A very good morning to you. You're back with Radio Sri Lanka, the station for the nation, on 97.4 and 97.6 FM, and we go across the globe on www.slbc.lk. And we are having today Mr. Sugeeshwara Senadhira today at the Beam to talk about the independence of Sri Lanka, which will be celebrated on the 4th of February, that is day after tomorrow, at the Golf Face Green. And let's move on to back in conversation with Mr. Sugeeshwara. So, looking back in retrospect, what are we as Sri Lankans lacking after 76 years after gaining independence?
Before talking about the things lacking, I wish to point out there are certain achievements we made. Our literacy rate shot up to 90s in a very short period of time. Then health service, health benefits to the people, then reduction of child mortality, the longevity of men and women. All these are factors we have taken, we have scored better than most of the developing nations in the 50s, 60s and 70s. Then, of course, we have enjoyed adult franchise for nearly 9 decades, since 1931, and Sri Lankan women enjoyed voting rights even before some of the European women. Some European countries introduced universal franchise much later. Though we made these gains, we had many failures too, as evident from the recent economic crisis and the youth insurrections and the Aragale and so on. One of the main failures is failure to empower youth segment of the country. This was, and also reconciliation with ethnic harmony. We failed in that direction too. Both sides are to be blamed for that, and we had to face 2 youth insurrections. Sinhala youths took arms on 2 occasions in 1971 and again in 1988-89. Then since 83 we have witnessed a 3-decade-long ethnic conflict where the Tamil youths took arms against the Sri Lankan forces, attempts of separation. All these have resulted in the failures of our ruling classes. All the governments have failed to solve these major problems. Though many attempts were made and there were genuine attempts by both parties to get together, but due to certain pressures from the hardliners, they failed to come to a final agreement. Another area is youth resentment today. That is, we did not cater to find employment avenues for the youth segment of the nation, the most important segment. We did not go in for massive educational reforms to suit global trends of employment, which is continuously changing, the skill development. You see, those who are passing out of the universities were not trained to go in for professional studies, and those who failed to get into universities were not given the other skills necessary. Although the attempts were made much later, it was a bit too late. That's why we have a large segment of unemployment, dissension among the youth. And these problems will have to be now, of course, everybody has taken, everybody realized we have failed in these areas, and now the drastic measures have been taken. And vocational studies, now we have formed a separate university too in Sri Lanka for vocational studies, in addition to the various institutions for skill development. So this will take time, because currently the priorities are changed. That is mainly due to it's a long-drawn ethnic conflict and the heavy expenditure on armaments, and then subsequently the resettlement of displaced persons and so on, the land dispute settlement. All these were neglected due to education reforms, and other skill development programs were taken the back seat because we had to spend money on other priorities. Now we are on right track, as one can see, and we should progress, but the failures are still there. And what is essential is to understand the areas of the failures, especially the education reforms. It has to be expedited to ensure that youths will get employment avenues even immediately after passing out from the universities or educational institutions.
Yes, that was all about the Independence Day what we were lacking. And as Mr. Sugeeshwara said, we will soon get back in track sooner. And so moving on with the final question in today's interview, Mr. Sugeeshwara, is there anything that you want to add and give as a message to the people listening?
On the occasion of Independence anniversary, one should always think of the nation first, and we have to make certain sacrifices rather than making demands for a small segment of a community. See, we have to think of the nation and the people. The larger picture should be taken into view, and there the political unity is required. The stability of the government, the political unity, setting aside petty political differences. All the political parties should get together to get the nation out of the current economic crisis. Already we have made certain recoveries, some certain extent of recoveries have been made, but there's a long way ahead, you see, because we have to, we are still, every year we are paying debt payment crisis, and we have to increase our exports, we have to ensure more foreign exchange income. All these things need the national reconciliation, national unity, and the people's top priority should be the development rather than demonstrations, protests, and work stoppage. Rather than these, we should make certain sacrifices to ensure that nation gets into the correct path of progress.
Well, that was the final message of today's invitee, the guest, Mr. Sugeeshwara Senadhira, the media advisor to Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena, and the veteran journalist of audiovisual and print media as well, and who has served and set a unique record of serving as international media director to 3 presidents, Mahinda Rajapaksa, Maithripala Sirisena and Gotabaya Rajapaksa as well. So thank you so much, Mr. Sugeeshwara Senadhira, for accepting our invitation and visiting us and to talk about the independence of Sri Lanka, the 76th Independence Day of Sri Lanka, out of your busy schedule. So thank you once again for making time out of your busy schedule.
Thanks. I'm extremely happy, and thanks for giving me this opportunity to talk to the nation through this popular channel.
Thank you so much. And you're tuned to Radio Sri Lanka 97.4 and 97.6 FM Island Wide.